If you are a long-time fan of the Resident Evil franchise and you have been following not just the numbered titles but also the spin-offs, the name Resident Evil Revelations might ring some bells. It might even be your favorite game in the franchise, even your favorite game of all time. But it's probably not. However, Resident Evil Revelations 2, that's a different story. Because Resident Evil Revelations 2 is genuinely peak.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
So if you are one of the 5 people who actually played Revelations 2 and liked the game, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this for smart people who like Revelations 2. I'm not gonna spend too much time glazing the game. If you played it, you know what I'm talking about. The game brought us mechanics that are sort of used up until this day in Resident Evil, namely the stealth mechanics that we saw in Resident Evil 4 Remake was basically copy-pasted from Resident Evil Revelations 2. So gameplay wise, the game was made really well. It's one of my favorites in the, in the action-based Resident Evil era. But the gameplay was not the only thing that was really good about it. Then we have the story, and the stories in like the games in Resident Evil are usually not that great. It's not really story focused, it's more like character and gameplay focused. But here I would say for Resident Evil standards, it was done really well. It was, sort of experimental, similarly to Revelations 1, but Revelations 1 sort of, I would say, failed to do what it set out to do, as it tried to be more like a political thriller, and it tried to portray all of the parties involved as sort of morally gray, but the conflict at the end ended up being very black and white. And furthermore, the newly introduced characters were also not that very well written, with the exception of Raymond, who was sort of intriguing, who I would like to see return in a potential Revelations 3, which is a topic of this video. But all the other characters were either unremarkable, like Parker, or just straight up annoying, like Jessica. And the only 2 characters you sort of end up caring for are Chris and Jill, because again, those are the ones that you know. Revelations 2 largely improved the character problem, because not only do we play as Claire, who returned after last appearing in Resident Evil Degeneration, which was a movie, but before that she last appeared in Code Veronica. That was her last game. I mean, the last canon game if we don't count like Darkside Chronicles and all that stuff. But we also see the return of my man, my brother, Barry Burton.
Barry Burton.
And both characters absolutely nail their roles in the game. And the newly introduced characters, they're pretty good as well. Moira, who is the daughter of Barry, is teamed up with Claire, and she has her own things going on. She has a rather unstable relationship with her father, and also her panic fear of guns that she needs to overcome throughout the game. And then Barry's companion is Natalia, who is this mysterious young girl that Barry finds on the island where he's looking for Moira, who we would later find out was supposed to be used as a vessel for Alex Wesker. And Alex Wesker serves as the main antagonist for the game. And as the name tells us, she is the sister of Albert Wesker. As Wesker and Spencer, she was also obsessed with immortality. She decided for a different approach than those two, as she was going to steal someone's body to transfer her consciousness there and reach immortality that way. Her relationship to Spencer and Wesker, is very interesting. She does not agree with them, but she also holds Spencer in, high regards because he served as sort of a father to those two. And even her ideas, while Spencer and Wesker's idea of immortality was very literal, Alex chooses a different approach for her immortality to be more abstract or psychological. And thematically, the game, fits this narrative, because we see Alex being obsessed with Kafka, like Franz Kafka, the author, probably most well known for Metamorphosis, Not that metamorphosis, this metamorphosis. And throughout the game, in like loading screens and such, we see passages from his works. Honestly, this kind of storytelling where the work is, inspired or draws heavy parallels to another work, to different work that's, very well known, that's very psychological, very personal, can either work really well or can just be pretentious, trying to be deeper than it actually is. And the Revelations 2 falls somewhere in the middle on that spectrum. It's not, very well done, but it's also not really terrible. Like, there are things to improve, but I think it laid the ground for the future installments to be like this. And it's something I would never expect from Resident Evil to pull off. So I'm not even really gonna complain about it not being so good for the first time around. And because of all that, Alex Wesker also was not a very, physically threatening villain, like for example Wesker or basically any other villain in Resident Evil. To the point when you first meet her, she commits a Nacho reference from Better Call Saul. And I mean, it is true that at the end she does transform into a giant monster, because it's a Resident Evil game, so it has to have a giant monster at the end. But the ending of the game is what's interesting. Whether you get the good or bad ending, only the good one is canon. But it doesn't really matter, because Alex does end up transferring her consciousness into Natalia, into the little girl who subsequently gets adopted by Barry. And if you do not see the potential for the sequel in this, I don't know what to tell you, man. We know that Capcom has been focusing on mainline titles, meaning the numbered titles, and the remakes as of recently, and also online games that no one in the world has ever played. I swear to God, if you tell me you played this, you're lying. Or this, and I played RE-verse, and I can say I'm not surprised the game has gone under. Okay, the game was ass. The only saving grace for those games was that they came free. Resistance came free with Resident Evil 3, and RE-verse came free with Resident Evil Village, although I think there was a possibility to buy it after. I'm gonna tell you one thing, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I would never buy those games. So instead of focusing on those, Capcom could focus on, spin-offs, like they used to before. Code Veronica was technically a spin-off, although I do consider it a mainline game, because it's rather important. It sees the return of Wesker, but it was still a spin-off, it was not a numbered title, and people love it. Just make Revelations 3. Not only would that be a nice change of pace, we could also see return of some characters that we haven't seen for a while, like Carlos and Sheva. Those two characters that I really do want to see return someday. Obviously, Alex Wesker in Natalia's body would be the pick for the villain, as by now, if you follow the current timeline, she's probably an adult, and her plotline was never resolved, so it makes sense to bring her back in some capacity. I mean, you're just gonna have Barry raising Alex Wesker this whole time and never elaborate on this. So now I'm gonna get to how and why and when to make Revelations 3. The reason why I mainly think that it's time for Revelations 3 is that enough time has passed after Revelations 2 for Natalia to grow up to fully, turn into Alex Wesker. So the plot of the story would obviously be her taking over, and she starts to realize something went wrong during the transfer, so her body begins to deteriorate. Maybe it's Natalia's consciousness fighting back. That'd be sort of interesting dynamics when they cannot really do anything to Alex, because that would would also kill Natalia. And this sort of dynamic is something that we have not yet seen in Resident Evil, but it's sort of also within the realms of possibility in how the franchise operates. We have hive minds in the Las Plagas, we have like stored consciousness in the Mutamycete, so why not have a shared consciousness, or rather a shared body for two people? And because this would only be a spin-off, the stakes would also not have to be that high. And what I just described would perfectly play into the hands of Capcom if they were to make a more personal, a more isolated game from the rest of them. And the way I would do it would be that Alex sort of starts to take over Natalia's body fully, and she escapes from Barry. She like goes to hiding or discovers another island like she did in Revelations 2, or a different place, because the island setting will start to get old quickly. We had island in Resident Evil 4 and Revelations 2, and there have probably been other islands in Resident Evil, the one in Code Veronica too. So the island setting is probably getting old by this time. There is always an island or a castle or a village, and a spin-off would be time and place to shake things up a little bit, shake up the recipe. Also, the game would have a smaller budget, obviously, because it's just a spin-off, so in case it doesn't sell, they wouldn't be losing all that much money. I mean, the worst case scenario, the game can take place in a location we've seen before, so they can reuse the assets. Sort of how Yakuza is making spin-offs, for example the Majima one, where they just reuse the entire map from Infinite Wealth. I could even see Alex Wesker going into the village where Resident Evil Village takes place. And it would actually be really easy to explain story-wise, because it would be within Alex's character to go after, Spencer's steps. She finds out that Spencer was somehow related to Mother Miranda and that she was seeking immortality, and she was actually immortal as we saw in Village. So it would make sense for Alex if, her body, if she's also sort of fighting with Natalia over the body, it would make sense for her to seek other methods of becoming immortal. And the whole thing with the Mutamycete was so poorly explained, you can do basically anything about it. You could do a storyline where Alex is trying to entrap Natalia within the connected consciousness of the Mutamycete so she can keep the body, but at the end of the day the hero sort of switch it, upside down, and they entrap Alex within the connected consciousness, and boom, you have the entire game right here, Capcom. You should hire me by now. And for the main protagonist, because it would be a smaller scale game, I think we could afford only one main protagonist as opposed to Resident Evil Village, where there was Ethan but also Chris had a playable section. The way I would do Revelations 3 is to have Barry go look for Natalia / Alex, but he gets captured or lost, or something happens to him that he's not able to complete the mission. So he gets in contact with Jill and he asks Jill to help him, but he avoids telling her that Alex is in Natalia's body. He only says that he needs help in saving his daughter Natalia, his adoptive daughter, but he doesn't tell her that Alex is taking over because he's afraid that Jill would take matters into her own hands and sort of kill both Natalia and Alex in the process. Even though Jill would never do that, he's still afraid. This is yet again in character with Barry, because Barry betrayed the stars, in the past, back in Resident Evil 1, in fear for his family. Back then he did it because of Albert Wesker, now he would do it because of Alex Wesker. I think that would be a nice circle for Barry to describe. And in that way, it would be also a nice ending for his particular character, for Barry. And I know it sounds sad that Barry is going to die, but there are already many characters in the franchise, and it's about time they start to wrap up their stories. So, you know, what are you gonna do?
We don't know.
But you know what? Barry does not need to necessarily die. He can retire or, you know, just make the game a definitive ending for him or some other character. And because of Claire's involvement in Revelations 2 and her overall involvement with Alex Wesker, I think it would be fitting to have her face off against Alex in some capacity. I think it would also thematically fit with Chris, you know, fighting Albert. And now his sister is going to fight Albert's sister, Alex. On the other hand, I do not really see Claire carrying, you know, that much weight as, you know, carrying the franchise forward, carrying the fight against Alex Wesker, because she was always involved with different things. She was always either involved with children, you know, taking care of children, or just being an activist for TerraSave. This is why I think Jill would be a far better fit for the role of protagonist in this story that I just created in my head. Because there's also her involvement with Barry. You know, Barry was her companion in the original Resident Evil. So bringing those two together just makes sense. And when it comes to Alex, I do not think this should be the last game for her, just because I genuinely like her as a character. I think she could bring a very interesting dynamics for the franchise that we have not seen before, and I think there are many things you could do with her, because again, her threat in Revelations 2 was far more psychological. I think Revelations 3 could serve, you know, as a bridge for Alex to sort of transition from like the spin-offs to the mainline entries, or at least outside of like Revelations 3, give her at least one more game after that, just one more. Anyway, the chances of what I just described are slim to none. There is almost like no chance that Alex is ever coming back, and this was all just my silly dream that I would like to see realized someday. That will probably never happen, but I would like to see Capcom bring back, you know, at least some spin-offs of Resident Evil, or whether it's Revelations 3 or any other spin-off, because I got kind of tired of just remakes and the online games that no one ever played. And of course I'm excited for Resident Evil 9, but you know, just a sprinkle, just a little bit of something on the side that brings back the characters that we know and love. And that's not like I'm not going to shit all over Grace and call her a shit character, because first of all, I actually like where Resident Evil 9 seems to be heading from like the trailers and everything. And second of all, we have not even played the game yet, so I don't think you can really tell that she's a bad character if she has not really been in her own game yet. Anyway, Resident Evil is one of the few franchises that I still, care about and still like play as they come out. Do not blame me for hoping to see it branch out someday. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, if you made it this far, leave a like. And if you do, Revelations 3 is definitely going to happen. And if you did not enjoy the video, feel free to tell me why in the comments, and I will make sure to ignore it. And if any Capcom representative was watching and made it this far, just know you can have my pitch for Revelations 3, but I want $1 million zillion bajillion dollars. And I also want to be credited in the game. And if you make it without a credit, I am going to sue. So anyway, hopefully I will see you next time. This has been the S stands for silly, the greatest Resident Evil content creator. Goodbye.